There's a surveillance camera. It captured someone parking Jennifer Kess's car and walking away. But here's the thing. In every single frame, the person's face is blocked by a fence post. Every single frame. The camera snapped a photo every 3 seconds, and somehow, in all 3 images where the suspect appears, the fence lines up perfectly to hide their face. A 1 in a million coincidence. Or something else entirely. Jennifer Kesse was 24 years old, a finance manager at Central Florida Investments, a timeshare company in Orlando. She'd graduated from the University of Central Florida with a degree in finance, just bought her own condo in a nice complex, and was in a serious relationship with a boyfriend who lived in Fort Lauderdale. By all accounts, she was thriving. Young, successful, independent. She'd just gotten back from a romantic vacation with her boyfriend in the Virgin Islands. They'd spent the weekend in St. Croix. On Sunday, January 22nd, she spent the night at her boyfriend's place in South Florida. On Monday morning, January 23rd, she drove straight to work. That evening, around 6 p.m., she drove home to Orlando. She called her parents during the drive, talked to her boyfriend around 10 p.m. Normal night. Nothing unusual. The next morning, she didn't call her boyfriend like she always did before leaving for work. He called her. Straight to voicemail. He figured she was in a meeting, but when she didn't show up at the office, no call, no explanation, her employer contacted her parents. Her parents drove 2 hours from Tampa, terrified. When they got to her condo, her car was gone, but inside everything looked normal. Wet towel in the bathroom, clothes laid out, signs that she'd showered and gotten ready for work that morning. She'd left for work, and then she vanished. 2 days later, someone spotted her black Chevy Malibu on the news and called police. It was parked at an apartment complex about a mile from her home. When investigators checked the parking lot's surveillance footage, they found something chilling. At approximately noon, on January 24th, the day she disappeared, a camera recorded someone parking her car and walking away. The footage is grainy. The person appears to be wearing work clothes. They move with purpose, like they've done this before. But their face, completely hidden. The apartment complex had a fence surrounding the lot, and in every single frame where the suspect appears, a fence post perfectly obscures their features. FBI analysts couldn't determine if it was a man or a woman. The best they could say was that the person stood between 5 feet 3 inches and 5 feet 5 inches. Even NASA tried to enhance the footage. They couldn't identify the figure. It's one of the most frustrating pieces of evidence in any missing persons case. Here's where it gets darker. Jennifer's condo complex was undergoing major construction at the time. There were workers everywhere, many of them laborers who didn't speak English. Jennifer had complained to her family multiple times that the construction workers catcalled her, whistled at her, harassed her. She felt uncomfortable walking to her car. Investigators wanted to question these workers, but many had already moved to other job sites. The language barrier made interviews difficult. No solid leads emerged. Police also looked at her personal life. Ex-boyfriend who'd been upset about their breakup and wanted to get back together, questioned and cleared. Her current boyfriend, also cleared. A manager at work who'd made advances she rejected. Interviewed multiple times and ruled out. A search dog tracked a scent from her abandoned car back to her condo parking lot. That suggested the suspect had walked back after leaving her car, possibly to retrieve their own vehicle, but the trail ended there. Her car had been wiped down. No useful fingerprints. Only a single latent print and a small DNA fiber were recovered. Her valuables were left inside, so robbery wasn't the motive. But her phone, iPod, keys, purse, briefcase, and the clothes she was wearing that morning, all gone. Her phone never turned back on. Her bank account was never accessed. It was as if Jennifer Kesse had been erased from existence between the time she locked her front door and walked toward her car. Investigators believe she was abducted somewhere along that path, possibly in the parking lot of her own condo complex. The wet towel, the laid-out clothes, the evidence of a morning routine. She clearly got ready for work that day. She left her home. She just never made it to her car. The theories have ranged from targeted abduction to human trafficking to something involving the construction workers. Her family remains open to all possibilities, but nearly 20 years later, there's been no arrest, no body, no answers. The case drew national attention. In May 2007, Jennifer's employer, led by David Siegel, the timeshare billionaire, offered a $1 million reward for information leading to her safe return. The deadline passed. No one ever claimed it. In 2008, the Florida House of Representatives passed the Jennifer Kesse and Tiffany Sessions Missing Persons Act to reform how missing persons cases are handled in the state. The FBI took over the investigation in 2010. Still nothing. Jennifer's parents never gave up. They hired private investigators, conducted their own searches, pushed for answers when the official investigation stalled. They filed civil complaints. They kept their daughter's name in the news. Then, in October 2025, something changed. Jennifer's father announced a breakthrough. Investigators had identified new DNA evidence and significantly narrowed the pool of suspects. For the first time in 2 decades, but the case is no longer considered cold. But Jennifer is still missing. The phantom figure in the surveillance footage, the person who parked her car, who walked away with their face perfectly hidden, has never been identified. Here's what haunts investigators: that fence, those posts, the timing of the camera. How is it possible that in every single frame, the suspect's face is blocked? Was it incredibly bad luck? Or did someone know exactly where to walk? The camera snapped every 3 seconds. The fence posts were narrow. The odds of avoiding detection in every single shot seem astronomical. Unless someone had studied that camera, unless they knew the angle, the timing, the exact path to walk. That thought has kept detectives up at night for almost 20 years. When some believe the fence blocking was pure coincidence, bad luck that made an already difficult case impossible. Others aren't so sure. The precision of it feels deliberate. Like someone who'd watched the camera, timed their movements, knew exactly where the blind spots were. If that's the case, then whoever took Jennifer didn't just grab her in a moment of opportunity. They planned it. They knew the area. They knew how to disappear. Jennifer Kesse was supposed to go to work that Tuesday morning. Instead, somewhere between her front door and her car, she was taken. Her car was abandoned. A figure walked away, and the only evidence that could identify them is hidden behind a fence post, frozen in 3 frames of grainy video, still waiting to be solved. How does a man walk into a bar and never walk out when there's only one exit? That's the question that's haunted investigators for nearly 2 decades. Because on April 1st, 2006, Brian Schaffer was captured on security cameras entering a Columbus, Ohio bar. But no camera ever recorded him leaving, and no one has seen him since. Brian Schaffer was 27 years old, a second-year medical student at Ohio State University. He'd grown up in Pickerington, a suburb outside Columbus, and graduated from OSU with a degree in microbiology before starting med school in 2004. By all accounts, he was on track for a successful career. He had a serious girlfriend, Alexis Wagoner, also a medical student. Their families expected him to propose soon, probably during a trip to Miami they had planned for spring break. But Brian had been through a lot recently. Just 2 weeks before he vanished, his mother had died from a blood disorder. Friends said he seemed to be handling it well, but losing a parent takes a toll. His father noticed Brian looked exhausted that night. He'd been up cramming for exams all week. On March 31st, 2006, a Friday, classes ended for spring break. Brian had dinner with his father to celebrate, then headed out to meet his friend Clint Florence at the Ugly Tuna Saloona, a bar in the South Campus Gateway complex on High Street. And here's where things get strange. Brian and Clint spent the night bar hopping, hitting several spots in the arena district, having one shot at each location. Around midnight, they ran into a friend named Meredith Reed, who gave them a ride back to the Ugly Tuna for one last round. Security cameras captured all three of them going up the escalator to the bar's entrance at 1:15 a.m. At some point, Brian separated from his friends inside the bar. He was reportedly flirting with women, even taking someone's phone number despite having a girlfriend back home. The last time he appears on camera is around 1:55 a.m., just outside the entrance. He's seen talking briefly with two young women, saying goodbye, smiling, then walking off screen, back toward the interior of the bar. That's it. That's the last anyone ever saw of Brian Schaffer. Here's what makes this so baffling. He didn't walk toward the exit. He walked away from it. When the bar closed at 2 a.m., Clint and Meredith waited outside for Brian. He never came out with the crowd. They figured he'd gone home without telling them. Annoying, but not alarming. They tried calling him. No answer. By Monday, when Brian missed his flight to Miami, his girlfriend and father knew something was wrong. They reported him missing. Police started at the Ugly Tuna. The building had security cameras everywhere. This was a high-crime area, and the Gateway complex took surveillance seriously. They reviewed every frame. Here's the problem. Brian is seen entering. He's never seen leaving. The bar had one main public exit, the escalator where he was last filmed, but he never went back down it. Investigators checked footage from the other cameras in the building. Nothing. They checked footage from 3 other nearby bars. Nothing. Now, there was another way out. A service door, near where Brian was last seen, led to a first-floor hallway, which at the time connected to an active construction area with its own exterior exit. But this wasn't a simple walk through a door. It would have meant navigating an unlit construction zone, stepping over debris and equipment, likely in the dark. Officers thought this route would be nearly impossible to navigate while sober, let alone intoxicated, and Brian had been drinking all night, doing shots at every bar they hit. Plus, the cameras in that area were unreliable. One panned constantly across the space, the other was manually operated and might not have been pointed in the right direction. They could have missed him. One of the original investigators later said he could say with 100% certainty that Schaffer did not leave via the escalator, but he couldn't rule out the construction exit. But even if he'd taken that route, then what? His car was still parked outside his apartment, 6 blocks away. Nothing inside was disturbed. His phone went to voicemail. For months, nothing. Then in September, something strange happened. His girlfriend Alexis had been calling his phone every night, just to hear his voicemail. Usually it went straight to voicemail, but one night it rang 3 times. She called over and over just to hear it ring. His carrier said it might have been a computer glitch, but a ping from the phone was detected at a cell tower in Hilliard, 14 miles northwest of Columbus. It never happened again. Police explored every theory. They brought in dogs. They searched dumpsters, sewers, the banks of the Olentangy River. Brian's father and brother spent months wading through the water near bridges, searching. A psychic had told them Brian's body was near a bridge pier. They found nothing. Everyone who'd been with Brian that night was asked to take a polygraph. His father passed. Meredith Reed passed. But Clint Florence, Brian's best friend that night, refused. He'd been advised not to take one, though he's never been named as a suspect. The 2 women Brian was last seen talking to said they were never even asked to take a polygraph. Some investigators looked into the smiley face killer theory, the disputed idea that a serial killer was drowning young men across the Midwest. Columbus police eventually rejected any connection, in line with the FBI's position that no such killer exists. Others have wondered if Brian simply walked away, started a new life somewhere else. He loved tropical places. He'd told friends his real dream wasn't medicine, it was to start a band and play Jimmy Buffett-style music somewhere warm. Maybe the pressure of med school, his mother's death, the expectations of proposing. Maybe it all became too much. But there's no evidence he wanted to disappear. No secret accounts. No goodbye notes. No signs of planning. His passport was still at home. His car was still parked outside his apartment. 2.5 years after Brian vanished, his father Randy was clearing storm debris in his yard when a tree branch blew off and struck him in the head. He died the next day. He never found out what happened to his son. Brian's case has been featured on Dateline NBC. Pearl Jam's Eddie Vedder asked for tips at a concert. Brian had a tattoo of the band's logo on his arm. Tips poured in. Possible sightings in Michigan, Texas, even Sweden. None led anywhere. The ugly Tuna Saloona has since closed. The building has been renovated. Whatever secrets that place held might be buried forever. So what happened to Brian Schaffer? Did he slip out through the construction area and meet with foul play? Did someone he knew do something to him? Did he, against all evidence, choose to vanish? Nearly 20 years later, there's still no answer. Just a grainy image of a man talking to two strangers, then stepping out of frame, and never stepping back. It was 30 degrees outside. Kyle Fleischman walked out of the bar without his coat. The surveillance camera at Buckhead Saloon captured him leaving at 2:20 a.m. on November 9th, 2007. He was alone. He'd been dancing inside, drinking, having a good time. His friends had already left. Kyle decided to stay. Now he was walking into the freezing Charlotte night. Coatless, intoxicated, heading toward a pizza place a block away. The camera watched him go. He was never seen again. Kyle Fleischman was 24 years old, an Elon University graduate working for a healthcare recruiting agency in Charlotte. His family had moved to the city when he was in high school, and after college, he'd come back, living in a South Charlotte condo with 2 roommates, enjoying his 20s. His dad described him as social, quick to smile. He's someone who trusted everyone. He didn't have a girlfriend at the time, but he had plenty of friends. That Thursday night, Kyle and a group of friends went to a comedy show, then headed to Buckhead Saloon at 5th and College Streets for drinks. It was the kind of night that happens 1,000 times in every city. Young people bar hopping, laughing, losing track of time. By 11 p.m., some of his friends started leaving. By 1 a.m., most were gone. Kyle stayed. Security footage shows him inside the bar, dancing with a woman. She eventually leaves with a man police, later identified as her boyfriend, along with 2 other men. Kyle stays to keep drinking. Around 2:20 a.m., the camera catches him walking out the front door. No coat. 30-degree weather. Yet it was the kind of cold that cuts through you. Not the kind of night you'd choose to walk anywhere without layers. But Kyle was drunk. And when you're drunk and young and invincible, the cold doesn't seem to matter. He walks toward Fuel Pizza, reportedly ordering 2 extreme slices. Private investigators later confirmed this detail with someone who worked there. Kyle could eat anything, his father said. Even at 2 a.m., half frozen, he was hungry. So far, this is just a normal night. A guy having too much to drink, grabbing late-night pizza. Nothing unusual about any of it. And here's where it gets strange. Kyle's cell phone records show he made several calls after leaving the bar. To family, to a friend. The signals pinged off 2 different cell towers, both in the uptown Charlotte area. He was still there, still alive, still trying to reach people. Nobody answered. 4 years later, in 2011, private investigators found a cab driver who remembered something. He'd noticed a young white male walking on North Davidson Street, headed away from uptown. No coat, clearly intoxicated. He matched Kyle's description. That's the last reported sighting of Kyle Fleischman. North Davidson Street in 2007 wasn't what it is today. It was rougher, less developed, the kind of area where a drunk, coatless guy stumbling alone at 3 a.m. might attract the wrong kind of attention. Kyle's father, Dick Fleischman, has his own theory about what happened that night. He believes Kyle wandered into the wrong part of town, visibly intoxicated, an easy target. Someone driving by, maybe looking for an opportunity, spotted him. A robbery gone wrong. Kyle was killed, and his body was dumped at what was then a construction site at North Davidson and 16th Streets. No body has ever been found. The police investigated for years. They followed every lead, interviewed everyone who'd been at the bar that night, tracked down the woman Kyle had been dancing with, and the men she left with. All cleared. Kyle's ex-girlfriends were questioned. Friends? Family? Co-workers? Nobody had a motive. Nobody knew anything. Searchers combed the area. Police investigated. Private investigators were hired. The case made national news. The story of a young man walking out of a bar and disappearing into the night resonated with parents everywhere, with every 20-something who'd ever caught a cab home after a few too many drinks. But the leads dried up. Kyle's bank card was left behind at the bar, along with his coat. He had nothing of value on him that night. No reason for a robbery to turn violent. Unless whoever took him panicked. Unless things escalated before anyone could think. The construction site his father suspects has long since been built over. A NODA apartment complex now sits on the land. In 2018, Kyle's parents publicly stated their belief that their son is buried somewhere beneath that building. They've pushed for excavation. They've begged for answers. Nothing. Some have speculated that Kyle fell into a construction pit somewhere and was accidentally buried when work resumed. Others think he may have wandered to the railroad tracks and been hit by a train. Some believe he made it much further than anyone realizes. That his body is somewhere no one has thought to look. But the most likely theory, the one his father believes, is the simplest and the darkest. Kyle was murdered. A random crime. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong condition. Charlotte Mecklenburg police have never made an arrest. There are no new leads, no suspects, no body. Dick Fleischman says he no longer hears from detectives. He holds no hope that Kyle will be found alive, or that whoever killed him will ever face justice. Part of my brain tells me what I don't know may be in my best interest, he said in an interview. The Fleischmans left Charlotte in 2010. They moved to Hilton Head, then to Florida. They couldn't stay in the city where their son vanished. Every time someone mentions Charlotte, Dick says he gets a sick feeling. Kyle's mother, Barbara, stayed connected to a nonprofit called Kindermorn, a group that counsels parents who've lost a child. It's one of the few good things to come out of the tragedy. But there are no answers. Just a surveillance video of a young man leaving a bar in the cold. A few phone calls that went unanswered. A cab driver who saw someone matching his description walking away from the lights. And then nothing. The cameras watched Kyle walk away from Buckhead Saloon that night. They captured him ordering pizza. They tracked him for a block or two. Then the footage ends. Somewhere between that pizza shop and sunrise, Kyle Fleischman disappeared. The cold November night swallowed him whole. 18 years later, no one knows where he went or what happened when he got there. His family keeps a $10,000 reward active through Charlotte Mecklenburg Crime Stoppers. They've never stopped hoping someone will come forward with information. A witness, a confession, or something. But Charlotte has changed since 2007. The Noda neighborhood where Kyle may have been killed is now trendy, full of breweries and apartments. The construction sites are long gone. Whatever happened that cold November night, the evidence may be buried under concrete and steel. All that remains is the footage. Kyle walking out of a bar. Kyle ordering pizza. Kyle disappearing into the darkness. And the cold, unanswered question, what happened next? She left the bar without her shoes. The surveillance footage from Kilroy's Sports Bar in Bloomington, Indiana, shows Lauren Spearer walking out at 2:27 a.m., barefoot, clearly intoxicated. She'd taken off her shoes earlier on the sand-covered patio. She left them behind, along with her phone. A few hours later, at 4:30 a.m., she was seen one last time, walking south on College Avenue, still barefoot, wearing black leggings and a white shirt. Then she disappeared. That was June 3rd, 2011. Lauren Spearer was 20 years old. She has never been found. Lauren was a student at Indiana University, studying textiles merchandising. She'd grown up in Scarsdale, New York, in an affluent suburb outside the city. She was active in the Jewish community at IU and had spent her previous spring break planting trees in Israel. By all accounts, she was a normal college student, enjoying her time at a party school, figuring out her future. On the night she vanished, Lauren went out drinking with friends. Her boyfriend, Jesse Wolfe, stayed in that night. They texted back and forth before he went to bed. According to witnesses, Lauren was very intoxicated by the time she left the bar, maybe too intoxicated. Here's the timeline, pieced together from surveillance footage and witness statements. Around 12:30 a.m., Lauren left her apartment with a friend named David Rohn. They went to Jay Rosenbaum's apartment, where she met up with Corey Rossman. At 1:46 a.m., she entered Kilroy's sports bar. At 2:27 a.m., she left, barefoot, without her phone, walking with Rossman toward her apartment complex. A passerby named Zach Oakes noticed how drunk she was and asked if she was okay. At 2:48 a.m., Lauren entered an alley between College Avenue and Morton Street. Security cameras captured her exiting the alley 3 minutes later, walking toward an empty lot. Her keys and purse were found along this route through the alley. She dropped them as she walked. And here's where things get complicated. Lauren and Rossman ended up at Rossman's apartment. He was stumbling, vomiting on the carpet. His roommate, Michael Beth, put Rossman to bed. Beth then tried to convince Lauren to stay over. For her own safety, he said. She was too intoxicated to walk home alone. But Lauren refused. She wanted to go back to her own apartment. She wanted to drink more. At 4 feet 11 and 100 pounds, after hours of drinking and possibly drugs, she should have been nowhere near walking home alone. Beth called his neighbor, Rosenbaum, asking him to take care of Lauren. Eventually, she ended up at Rosenbaum's apartment next door. He noticed a bruise under her eye. She said she didn't know how she got it. She used his phone to make 2 calls to friends. Neither picked up. No messages were left. At 4:30 a.m., Rosenbaum says Lauren left. He reported last seeing her at the intersection of 11th Street and College Avenue, headed south, barefoot, alone, extremely intoxicated. She was 4 feet 11 and weighed about 100 pounds, tiny, vulnerable, walking through downtown Bloomington in the dark without shoes or a phone. The surveillance footage from that night is haunting. In some frames, you can see her stumbling, clearly disoriented. In others, she's being helped along by one of the men she was with. She looks like someone who shouldn't be alone, someone who needed help. But by 4:30 a.m., she was alone. And then she was gone. Later that morning, her boyfriend Jesse sent her a text. An employee at Kilroy's, who had found Lauren's phone, replied. That's when Jesse reported her missing. The investigation was massive. Police, FBI, volunteers. They searched for weeks. In August 2011, they conducted a 9-day search of a landfill where Bloomington's trash was hauled. Nothing. Over 3,000 tips came in over the next few years. None led to Lauren. Here's what makes this case so agonizing. There are obvious suspects, but no proof. The men Lauren was with that night, Rossman, Rosenbaum, Beth, and her boyfriend Wolf, all hired lawyers and refused to take police-issued polygraphs. They claimed they didn't trust the Bloomington police, yet they said they took privately administered polygraphs instead. But Lauren's parents were suspicious. We felt somebody could have slipped something into her drink at Kilroy's, her father said. The family believes the men know more than they've told investigators. One theory is that Lauren overdosed. Her friends told police she'd used drugs that night: alcohol, cocaine, crushed up Klonopin. She also had a rare heart condition called long QT syndrome, which made drug use especially dangerous. Some have speculated that she overdosed, and the people with her panicked and hid her body to avoid criminal charges. But a private investigator hired by the family doubted that theory. Drug use was everywhere on campus, he said. Why would anyone risk covering up an accidental death when getting caught with drugs was so common it barely mattered? Another theory points to a stranger abduction. In 2015, another IU student named Hannah Wilson was murdered after leaving the same bar, Kilroy's. Her body was found in Brown County, and a local man named Daniel Messel was convicted. Some investigators wondered if Messel might be connected to Lauren's case, but no charges were ever filed. In 2016, the FBI searched a property in Martinsville, about 20 miles north of Bloomington. Cadaver dogs indicated potential evidence. Anthropologists dug and sifted dirt. They found nothing. Lauren's parents have accepted that their daughter is probably dead. They've filed civil lawsuits against the men she was with that night, accusing them of negligence, of supplying alcohol to someone already visibly intoxicated, then failing to make sure she got home safely. But they still don't know what happened. No one does. The surveillance footage tells part of the story. Lauren leaving the bar. Lauren walking through the alley. Lauren dropping her belongings as she stumbles along. The cameras captured her final hours in fragments, glimpses of a young woman too intoxicated to take care of herself. But the cameras didn't capture what happened after 4:30 a.m. They didn't see where she went, who she was with, what happened in those dark hours before sunrise. Lauren Spiro walked barefoot into the night, and somewhere between that intersection and morning, she vanished completely. 14 years later, her family is still waiting for answers. The men she was with that night have moved on with their lives. Some have gotten married, started careers, left Bloomington behind. But the questions remain. Why didn't anyone make sure she got home safely? Why did they all hire lawyers so quickly? What do they know that they haven't told police? Lauren's parents have said they believe she was dead within hours of her disappearance. They've accepted that they may never find her body, but they haven't accepted not knowing what happened. The surveillance footage from that night ends at 4:30 a.m. After that, there's only silence. A tiny young woman, barefoot and alone, walking into the darkness of a college town and never walking back. Security cameras captured Bryce Lespisa's car driving up a mountain road toward Castaic Lake. Once at 2:15 a.m. and again at 4:29 a.m. He drove up the same road twice, in the middle of the night, like he was looking for something or running from something. Then his car went off an embankment. When rescuers arrived, the SUV was on its side. His phone, wallet, and laptop were still inside. The rear window had been removed. Bryce was gone. Bryce Lespisa was 19 years old, a college student at Sierra College in Rocklin, California. He'd grown up in Naperville, Illinois, before his family moved to Laguna Niguel in Orange County. By all accounts, he was a normal kid. Quiet, close to his parents, figuring out his life like any other teenager. But in the days before he vanished, something changed. 2 weeks into the fall semester, Bryce started acting differently. His friends at Sierra College noticed it immediately. He started giving away his personal belongings. He seemed off, distant. On August 28, 2013, he drove 2 hours to Chico to break up with his girlfriend. After leaving her apartment, he got in his family's 2003 Toyota Highlander and started the 500-mile drive south to his parents' home. That's when things got strange. On August 29th, Bryce's parents got a call. Their car had needed roadside assistance in Buttonwillow, a small town in Kern County. Bryce had run out of gas. A service provider brought him fuel. Normal enough. But then, Bryce didn't leave. He stayed parked in the same spot for hours. His parents couldn't reach him. Worried, his mother called the service provider and asked them to check on him again. The owner went back and found Bryce still sitting there. After a conversation, Bryce finally agreed to continue driving. He called his mother and said he was heading home. The drive should have taken about 3 hours. He never arrived. By evening, his parents reported him missing. Investigators traced his phone, still in Kern County. A sheriff's deputy found him parked not far from where he'd been earlier. The deputy checked on him, talked to him, searched the vehicle. Nothing seemed wrong. No signs of impairment. No indication that anything was off. And yet, Bryce still didn't go home. He had a 500-mile drive ahead of him. His parents were waiting. He'd been missing for hours, and somehow he still couldn't, or wouldn't, complete the journey. At 2:08 a.m. on August 30th, Bryce called his mother again. He said he'd pulled off Interstate 5 to rest because he was tired. He described the area as a residential neighborhood, though his exact location wasn't clear. He was going to sleep for a bit, then continue the drive. That was the last time anyone heard his voice. A few hours later, there was a knock at his parents' door. They thought it was Bryce, finally home. Instead, it was a California Highway Patrol officer. Their SUV had been found between 4:20 and 5:15 a.m. in Castaic, Los Angeles County. It had gone down a 15-foot embankment near Castaic Lake and was lying on its side. Bryce was nowhere to be found. Here's what makes this case so baffling. Surveillance footage shows Bryce's car driving up the mountain road toward Castaic Lake twice that night. First at 2:15 a.m., just 7 minutes after he called his mother, then again at 4:29 a.m. What was he doing out there in the middle of the night? Was he meeting someone? Searching for something? Or was something wrong with him, mentally, emotionally, that made him act irrationally? When investigators examined the SUV, they found his belongings inside. His phone, his wallet, his laptop. The rear window had been removed. Police believe he climbed out through the back after the crash. There was blood on the windshield, consistent with impact, but nothing suggested a life-threatening injury. So where did he go? That's the question that has haunted investigators for over a decade. A young man crashes his car, climbs out the back window, and walks away, leaving everything behind. His phone, his wallet, his laptop, all the things you'd need if you were planning to go anywhere. The search was massive. Ground teams, helicopters, divers, scent tracking dogs, volunteers. They covered the lake, the shoreline, the surrounding wilderness for days. Nothing. No footprints, no clothing, no body, no sign of which direction Bryce went after climbing out of that car. In September 2013, a burned body was found near Castaic Lake. For a moment, it seemed like the case might be solved, but investigators confirmed the remains belonged to an unrelated homicide victim from Los Angeles, not Bryce. Over the years, tips and sightings have trickled in. In 2022, a photograph circulated online showing a man in Missoula, Montana, who looked remarkably like Bryce. Detectives tracked him down. It wasn't him. The theories are all over the place. Some believe Bryce was having a mental health crisis, possibly triggered by drugs, stress, or something deeper. His behavior in the days before he vanished suggests something was wrong. Giving away possessions, breaking up with his girlfriend out of nowhere, sitting in his car for hours in the middle of nowhere, driving in circles instead of going home. These aren't the actions of someone thinking clearly. There were rumors that Bryce had started using drugs at college, specifically Vivance, a stimulant. Whether that played a role in his mental state that night, no one knows for certain. Others think he staged his disappearance. Maybe he wanted to escape his life, start fresh somewhere else. He was young, unattached, capable of vanishing if he wanted to, and some fear the worst. He wandered into the wilderness after the crash, injured, disoriented, possibly in the grip of some kind of mental break, and died somewhere no search team could find him. Castaic Lake is surrounded by rugged, unforgiving terrain, steep hillsides, dense brush, miles of wilderness. A body could be hidden for years, decades even. But here's the thing, his phone, wallet, and laptop were all left behind. If he planned to disappear, why leave everything? If he was injured, how did he get far enough that no dog could track his scent? Bryce Lespisa's parents have never stopped searching. His case was featured on Investigation Discovery's Disappeared in 2016. His mother still gives interviews, still pushes for answers, still holds out hope that someone knows something. More than a decade later, the cameras are the last record of Bryce. Driving up that mountain road in the dark, once, twice, then crashing at the bottom of an embankment. The footage is eerie because of how deliberate it looks. He wasn't speeding, he wasn't swerving. He drove up that road, came back down, then drove up again. Like he was working up the courage to do something, or like he was waiting for someone who never showed up. Whatever he was doing out there at 4 a.m., whatever was going through his mind, Bryce Lespisa took those answers with him when he crawled out of that SUV and walked away into nothing. The security footage is grainy, black and white. A man in a white shirt and slacks walks down the sidewalk of a quiet retirement community in Henderson, Nevada. He's carrying something, maybe a folder, maybe a portfolio. He walks with purpose, like he knows where he's going. Then he turns a corner and vanishes. That was December 13th, 2009. Stephen Coker was 30 years old. No one has seen him since. Stephen was a devout Mormon from a good family in Utah. He'd grown up in Amarillo, Texas, earned his Eagle Scout badge, served a mission in Brazil, and graduated from the University of Utah with a degree in communications. He'd interned in the governor's office. He'd worked as a journalist for a local newspaper, where some of his articles won awards. On paper, he was doing everything right. But by late 2009, things weren't going so well. Stephen had moved to St. George, Utah, hoping the warmer weather would suit him better than the cold winters in Salt Lake City. But it was the middle of the Great Recession, and jobs were hard to find. He'd been let go from his position at an advertising firm shortly after relocating. Now he was scraping by, handing out flyers for a window washing company. Part-time work. Not nearly enough to cover his bills. By November, he was several months behind on rent. He was actively looking for work, leaning on connections from his local church. His family said he seemed optimistic. His bishop said he was upbeat. But something was going on that nobody understood. Here's where it gets strange. On December 10th, 3 days before he vanished, Stephen drove almost 1,100 miles in a single day. He left St. George before dawn, drove north to Salt Lake City, then west across the state line into Nevada, all the way to a remote ranch in Ruby Valley. Why? To visit the family of an ex-girlfriend. She wasn't even there. He had lunch with her parents anyway, told them he was heading to Sacramento to visit family, then turned around and drove all the way back to St. George. Nearly 1,100 miles in one day for a lunch with people who weren't expecting him. His mother talked to him that night. He sounded fine. He didn't mention the road trip at all. 2 days later, on December 12th, he made another unexplained trip to Nevada. His phone pinged a cell tower near Overton at the north end of Lake Mead. That evening, he bought gas and snacks in Mesquite, just over the Arizona border. Then he went back to St. George, bought some Christmas gifts at a Kmart, and returned home around 10 p.m. A neighbor saw him leave again 30 minutes later. The next morning, Sunday, December 13th, 2 friends called Stephen about church meetings later that day. He told both of them he was in Las Vegas. He said he might not make it back in time for services. Neither friend asked why he was there. Neither noticed anything unusual about the conversation. And then, at 11:54 a.m., a home security camera in the Sun City Anthem retirement community captured Stephen's white Chevy Cavalier pulling into a cul-de-sac. 6 minutes later, a figure in a white shirt, believed to be Stephen, walked down the sidewalk in the opposite direction, carrying what looked like a folder or portfolio. Another camera caught his reflection as he walked north. That's it. That's the last anyone ever saw of Stephen Coker. The footage is haunting because of how normal it looks. A man walking with purpose. No sign of distress. No indication that anything was wrong. He looks like someone arriving for a meeting, not someone about to vanish forever. But here's the part that doesn't make sense. His phone kept pinging. At 5 p.m. that day, his phone hit a tower 10 miles northeast of where he'd parked. 2 hours later, another tower 2 miles further north. Early the next morning, another ping. Then, around 9 a.m., on December 14th, someone used his phone to check his voicemail. His landlord had just sent a text asking about rent. After that, nothing. The phone went silent. The battery probably died. It was never turned on again. Stephen's car sat in that cul-de-sac for days before anyone noticed. The Homeowners Association eventually tracked down his employer, who contacted his family. That's when they realized he was gone. Police searched the area. They found nothing. No signs of a struggle. No blood. No body. No wallet. No phone. No explanation. The retirement community was full of elderly residents. Not exactly a hotbed of criminal activity. There was no reason for Stephen to be there. He had no known connections to anyone in that neighborhood. So why did he drive there? What was in the folder? Who was he going to meet? Investigators combed the area. They interviewed residents. They tracked down every lead. Nobody in that neighborhood knew Stephen Coker. Nobody was expecting him. His presence there remains completely unexplained. The theories are all over the map. Some think Stephen was struggling more than anyone knew. He was behind on rent. He couldn't find work. Maybe he drove out to the desert and ended his life somewhere no one would find him. But if that's the case, why did his phone keep pinging for a day and a half afterward? Why did someone check his voicemail? Others wonder if he was meeting someone. The folder he was carrying suggests he might have been going to a job interview. But in a retirement community? On a Sunday? There's another theory. Darker. More desperate. Some have speculated Stephen might have gotten involved in something shady to make money. Gambling debt. Illegal work. Something that put him in contact with dangerous people. But there's no real evidence for any of that. And then there's the Susan Powell connection. Just a week before Stephen vanished, a Utah woman named Susan Powell disappeared under suspicious circumstances. Her husband, Josh Powell, was the prime suspect. After Stephen went missing, Josh's family suggested that maybe Susan had run off with Stephen, that the two had eloped together. Police found no evidence of any relationship between them. Both families dismissed the theory. It was, most likely, a desperate deflection by people trying to protect Josh Powell, but it muddied the waters and distracted from the search for Stephen. Stephen's father, Rolf, threw himself into finding his son. He gave interviews. He appeared on Investigation Discovery's Disappeared series. Then, in February 2011, just 3 weeks after filming his interview, Rolf died suddenly at age 61. He never learned what happened to his son. Stephen's mother, Deanne, kept searching. She kept the Christmas tree lights on for years, waiting for Stephen to come home. The family offered a $10,000 reward for information. Tips came in. None led anywhere. 15 years later, there are still no answers. Just a grainy video of a man walking down a sidewalk in a quiet neighborhood, carrying a folder, heading somewhere no one can identify. And then nothing at all. The last footage of Leah Roberts comes from a gas station in Washington state. She's alone, filling up her Jeep Cherokee, looking around nervously. Several times, the camera catches her peering out into the parking lot, like she's checking to see if someone is following her. 2 days later, her car was found crashed at the bottom of a ravine, deep in the wilderness near Mount Baker. Clothing was scattered along the road. A cryptic note was inside. Leah was gone. It was March 2000. Leah Roberts was 23 years old, a young woman from North Carolina who had recently lost her mother to cancer. She was grieving, restless, searching for something. She'd become obsessed with Jack Kerouac's On the Road, the Beat Generation novel about driving across America in search of meaning. So she decided to do it herself. Leah had always been independent, creative, a little unconventional. She wrote poetry. She dreamed of adventure. After her mother died, something shifted. She started talking about hitting the road, about finding herself somewhere out in the American West. Her friends thought it was just talk, grief processing, a way to cope. But Leah meant it. On March 9th, 2000, Leah packed up her 1996 Jeep Cherokee with camping gear, clothes, and her small kitten. She left North Carolina without telling anyone where she was going. Her family didn't even know she'd left until she was already gone. Over the next several days, Leah drove west. Credit card receipts traced her path across the country, through Tennessee, Oklahoma, Colorado, Idaho. She was alone the entire time, as far as anyone knows. On March 13th, she was in Bellingham, Washington, near the Canadian border. A ticket purchased at the local mall shows she saw a movie that afternoon, American Beauty. She was still alive, still moving. 2 days later, on March 15th, security cameras at a gas station captured her final footage. She looks okay in the video, not injured, not visibly distressed, but there's something off about her body language. She keeps looking around, checking the parking lot, like she's waiting for someone, or afraid someone might show up. That's the last confirmed sighting of Leah Roberts. 3 days later, on March 18th, joggers on Canyon Creek Road, a remote side route off the Mount Baker Highway, noticed something strange. Clothing scattered at the side of the road, articles tied to trees and branches at the edge of the woods, and at the bottom of a steep slope, a crashed Jeep Cherokee. Yet it was Leah's car. The vehicle had gone off the road at a curve and tumbled down the embankment. The damage was significant, but not catastrophic. Inside, investigators found Leah's belongings, her camping gear, her purse, some of her clothes. They also found a note. The note referenced Jack Kerouac and mentioned Desolation Peak, a real location in Washington state, made famous in Kerouac's novel, Desolation Angels. It was cryptic, poetic, the kind of thing a Kerouac fan might write, but Leah wasn't inside the car, and she wasn't anywhere nearby. Here's where the story gets strange. The crash scene didn't make sense. The car had gone off the road, yes, but investigators couldn't determine if someone had been driving it when it crashed. The airbags hadn't deployed. There was no blood inside. Some of Leah's belongings were scattered outside the vehicle, up on the road, tied to trees, almost like they'd been placed there deliberately. Search teams combed the surrounding wilderness for weeks. Dogs, helicopters, ground crews. They covered miles of rugged terrain. They found nothing. No body, no footprints, no sign of where Leah went after the crash. The theories split in several directions. Some believe Leah was the victim of foul play, that someone followed her from the gas station, ran her off the road, and abducted her. The nervous glances in the surveillance footage could support this. Maybe she knew someone was tailing her. Maybe she'd picked up a hitchhiker who turned dangerous. Others think Leah staged her own disappearance. She was grieving, lost, obsessed with Kerouac's romantic notion of dropping out of society. Maybe she crashed her car deliberately, scattered her belongings as a distraction, and walked off into the wilderness to start a new life. The cryptic note could have been a farewell. There's also the possibility that Leah survived the crash, wandered into the woods disoriented, and died of exposure somewhere no search team could find her. The terrain around Mount Baker is brutal. Dense forest, steep ravines, freezing temperatures. A body could disappear forever. But the scattered clothing bothers investigators. The note, the careful staging of items tied to trees. If Leah was injured and confused, would she have taken the time to do that? Or was someone else at the scene? The locals in Whatcom County remember the search. Volunteers came from all over to help comb the wilderness. They walked grid patterns through dense forest. He'd called her name, looked for any sign of where she might have gone. The terrain was unforgiving. Steep hillsides, thick underbrush, streams swollen with spring snowmelt. A body could be 50 feet from a search team and completely invisible. But they found nothing. No clothing, no remains, no sign that Leah had ever walked away from that crashed Jeep. 26 years later, the case remains unsolved. Leah's Jeep was towed away. The wilderness around Mount Baker has been searched multiple times. Nothing has ever been found. Her family still hopes for answers. They've kept her case active, pushed for media coverage, offered rewards for information. But the trail went cold the moment Leah drove away from that gas station. The surveillance footage is the last real glimpse of her. A young woman filling her tank, looking over her shoulder, alone in a parking lot, 3,000 miles from home. Whatever she was afraid of, or whoever she was running from, caught up with her somewhere on that mountain road, and took her somewhere no one has ever found. The kitten was never found either. Leah had brought her small cat on the trip. Cat food was discovered in the crashed Jeep, but the cat, like Leah, had vanished. Some investigators think this detail matters. If Leah staged her disappearance, would she have left her pet behind? Or did someone else take both of them? The gas station footage remains the most important piece of evidence. Leah looking around nervously, checking the parking lot, filling her tank before heading up into the mountains. She was 3,000 miles from home, completely alone, about to drive into some of the most remote wilderness in the Pacific Northwest. Whatever happened after she left that station, the cameras didn't catch. Just a young woman on a road trip that ended in a crashed car, scattered clothing, and a mystery that's never been solved. Leah Roberts would be 48 years old today. Her family still waits for the phone to ring, for someone to find something, for answers that may never come. The road she was chasing led nowhere, and she vanished along the way. The last image of Sneha Annie Phillip was captured on September 10th, 2001. She's shopping at Century 21, a department store just steps from the World Trade Center. The CCTV footage shows her browsing the racks, picking out a dress, lingerie, pantyhose, bed linens, 3 pairs of shoes. She spent $500 on her husband's credit card. The next morning, 2 planes hit the Twin Towers, and Sneha was never seen again. Did she die in the attacks? Or was she already dead before the first plane hit? That question has haunted investigators for over 2 decades. Sneha Annie Phillip was 31 years old, a physician completing her residency at St. Vincent's Hospital in Manhattan. She was married to Ron Lieberman, an emergency room resident at Jacobi Medical Center. They lived in an apartment at 30 West Street, just blocks from the World Trade Center. On paper, she had everything: a medical career, a loving husband, a life in one of the most exciting cities in the world. But there were cracks beneath the surface. In the months before she vanished, Sneha's life had been unraveling. She'd been dismissed from her residency program at St. Vincent's for undisclosed reasons. There were allegations of excessive drinking, rumors of affairs with women. Her marriage was reportedly strained. She had been arrested in 2001 for allegedly harassing a female companion after a night of drinking. On September 10th, 2001, Sneha was supposed to be at work. Instead, she stayed home. She chatted online with her mother in the afternoon, mentioning she planned to visit the World Trade Center Mall. Around 5 p.m., she stopped by the dry cleaners. Then, at 7:18 p.m., she walked into Century 21. The surveillance footage shows her shopping alone. She looks calm, normal, just a woman buying clothes on a Monday evening. She left the store at some point. No camera captured her exit, and then she disappeared. Her husband Ron came home around 4 a.m. after an overnight shift. He thought Sneha was asleep. The next morning, September 11th, the towers fell. Ron was called to St. Vincent's to help with the expected flood of survivors. He didn't realize Sneha was missing until he came home that night and found the apartment empty. Here's where the mystery deepens. The purchases Sneha made on September 10th, the dress, lingerie, bed linens, were never found. Not in the apartment, not anywhere. If she went home that night, where did those bags go? Ron told police that Sneha sometimes stayed out all night, visiting friends or going to bars, and he assumed she'd done the same on September 10th. But if she was out drinking, where did she go? Who was she with? The theories split into two camps. The first, Sneha died in the 9/11 attacks. She lived 2 blocks from the World Trade Center. When the planes hit, she might have rushed to help. She was a doctor, after all. She might have been inside the towers, in the plaza, in one of the surrounding buildings. Her body was never recovered, but neither were the bodies of over 1,000 other victims. There's possible evidence for this theory. Surveillance footage from her apartment building shows a woman entering at 8:43 a.m. on September 11th. Just 3 minutes before the first plane hit. The woman waits near the elevator, then leaves. Some believe this was Sneha, returning home after a night out. If so, she was alive that morning. She might have seen the attacks from her window. She might have run outside to help. But the footage is grainy. The woman's face isn't clear. Investigators couldn't confirm it was Sneha. The second theory is darker. Sneha was already dead before 9/11. Her troubled history, the dismissal from her residency, the drinking, the alleged affairs, the harassment arrest, painted a picture of a woman whose life was falling apart. Some investigators wondered if she'd met with foul play on the night of September 10th. Maybe she went home with someone she shouldn't have. Maybe something happened that had nothing to do with terrorism. Her family disputes this theory entirely. They believe Sneha was a hero who died trying to save others on September 11th. They fought for years to have her officially recognized as a victim of the attacks. In 2004, after a lengthy legal battle, a court ruled that Sneha, Annie Phillip, should be presumed dead as a result of the 9/11 attacks. Her name was added to the National September 11th Memorial. She's remembered as a victim, alongside the nearly 3,000 others who died that day. But the ruling was about legal status, not truth. The court acknowledged there was no definitive evidence of what happened to Sneha. No body, no remains, no witnesses who saw her on September 11th. The woman in the lobby footage was never confirmed to be her. The purchases from Century 21 were never found. Wherever Sneha went after leaving that store on September 10th, she took those bags with her. Here's what makes this case so haunting: the timing. If Sneha had disappeared on any other day, her case would have been investigated as a missing person. Police would have tracked her movements, interviewed her friends, looked into her troubled history, but she vanished the night before the worst terrorist attack in American history. And then everything was chaos. When Ron finally reported her missing, the city was in ruins. The police were overwhelmed. The hospitals were waiting for survivors who never came. In the confusion of those first terrible days, Sneha's disappearance got lost. By the time investigators could focus on her case, the trail was cold. The buildings where she might have spent her final hours were rubble. Anyone who might have seen her was dead. The CCTV footage from Century 21 is the last confirmed image of Sneha, Annie Phillip, a woman shopping for lingerie and a new dress, hours before her world and everyone else's would change forever. What she did after leaving that store, no one knows. Her husband Ron has remarried. He's moved on with his life. But he still doesn't know what happened to his first wife. Was she out drinking that night, as she sometimes did? Did she meet someone? Did she go home and then leave again in the morning? The September 11th attacks gave her disappearance a kind of cover. In the tragedy of that day, one missing woman was easy to overlook. Easy to assume she was just another victim. Easy to add her name to the memorial and close the file. But the questions remain. The shopping bags were never found. The dress, the lingerie, the bed linens, all gone. If she went home that night, those items should have been in the apartment. If she didn't go home, where did she spend her final hours? The footage from Century 21 shows a woman going through the motions of a normal life. Shopping, browsing, spending her husband's money on things she'd never get to use. And then, nothing. The attacks, the chaos, and one woman lost somewhere in between. The laptop was found first. Fishermen pulled it from the Susquehanna River in July 2005, lodged against a bridge support, several hundred yards from where Ray Grickar's car had been discovered months earlier. But here's the thing, the hard drive was missing. Someone had removed it before throwing the laptop in the water. Months later, in October, the hard drive was found on the riverbank, so badly damaged that investigators couldn't recover a single file. Whatever was on that computer, someone had made absolutely certain it would never be seen. Ray Grickar was the district attorney of Center County, Pennsylvania. On April 15, 2005, he went for a drive and never came back. His car was found the next day in Lewisburg, about 50 miles from his home. His cell phone was inside. His wallet was not. He was 59 years old, and he vanished without a trace. Ray Grickar had been the DA for nearly 2 decades. He was well respected, experienced, the kind of prosecutor who'd handled hundreds of cases over the years. He'd put away murderers, drug dealers, child predators. He'd made enemies. That's part of the job. But he'd also earned the trust of his community. On the morning of April 15, 2005, Ray called his girlfriend Patty to say he was going for a drive, heading toward Lewisburg. It was a Friday. He was taking the day off. Nothing unusual about it. He stopped at an antique store near the Susquehanna River around midday. That's the last confirmed sighting of Ray Grickar. When he didn't come home that night, Patty reported him missing. His red Mini Cooper was found the next day in a parking lot in Lewisburg near the river. Car was locked. His cell phone was on the floor. His laptop case and power cord were in the back, but the laptop itself was gone. The search began immediately. Police, FBI, volunteers. They combed the area around the river. Divers went into the water. Dogs searched the banks. They found nothing. Then, months later, the laptop surfaced. Damaged, waterlogged, but identifiable as Grickar's, and the hard drive was missing. Fishermen found it in July, lodged under a bridge. The laptop was damaged, but still recognizable. Investigators immediately noticed that the hard drive, the component that stores all files, emails, documents, browsing history, had been physically removed before the computer was thrown in the water. Months after that, in October, the hard drive itself was discovered on the riverbank. It had been battered against rocks, corroded by water, was completely destroyed. Whatever data it once contained was gone forever. This is the detail that changes everything. If Ray had simply fallen into the river, an accident, a suicide, why would the hard drive be removed? Why would someone take the time to separate the drive from the computer before disposing of both? That suggests planning. That suggests someone wanted to destroy whatever information was on that machine. The theories have multiplied over the years. Some believe Ray committed suicide. He'd been under stress. His daughter had suggested he seemed burnt out from the job. His brother Roy had died by suicide years earlier. Maybe Ray planned his own death, destroyed his computer to hide something personal, and walked into the river. But if he killed himself, where's the body? The Susquehanna has been searched multiple times, and nothing has ever been found. And people who knew Ray said he didn't seem suicidal. He was making plans for the future. He talked about retirement, about traveling with Patty. Others believe Ray staged his own disappearance, that he wanted out of his job, out of his life, out of Center County. The destroyed hard drive could have contained evidence of something he didn't want discovered. Financial problems, an affair, something that would have ruined his reputation. Possible sightings have been reported over the years. Someone matching Ray's description was spotted in Texas, in Europe, living under a new name. But none of these sightings have ever been confirmed. And then there's the darkest theory, that Ray was murdered. As district attorney, Ray had prosecuted dangerous people. He'd put drug traffickers in prison. He'd handled cases involving organized crime. He'd dealt with child sex abuse cases, some involving powerful individuals. Here's where it gets interesting. In 1998, Ray had investigated allegations of sexual abuse against Jerry Sandusky, Penn State football coach who would later be convicted of molesting dozens of children. At the time, Ray declined to prosecute. The reasons for that decision have never been fully explained. Years later, when the Sandusky scandal exploded, some wondered if Ray's disappearance was connected. Did he know something? Was he silenced? Had someone wanted to make sure he never testified? There's no evidence to support this theory, but there's no evidence to disprove it either. And the timing, the destroyed hard drive, the complete lack of a body, it all feels like more than coincidence. In 2011, Ray Gricar was declared legally dead, but the case remains open. His body has never been found. His fate remains unknown. The search for Ray continues, in a way. His girlfriend Patty still lives in the area. His family still holds out hope for answers. Every few years, someone claims to have seen him somewhere, and investigators follow up. Nothing ever pans out. What was on that hard drive? What secrets did Ray Gricar take with him when he disappeared? The laptop is gone. The drive is destroyed. Whatever evidence once existed is at the bottom of the Susquehanna, or in the hands of someone who's never coming forward. 20 years later, the questions remain. A prosecutor who spent his career seeking justice became a mystery himself. A man who knew how crimes were solved became a victim of one that may never be. Ray Gricar drove to Lewisburg on a spring afternoon, parked near the river, and stepped into the unknown. And somewhere between that parking lot and the water's edge, he disappeared completely. The antique store owner was the last person to see Ray alive. She said he seemed normal, friendly, just a man browsing through old things on his day off. Nothing about his behavior suggested he was about to vanish forever. But something happened after he left that store. Something that led to his car being abandoned, his laptop being destroyed, his hard drive being thrown in the river separately. As if someone wanted to make absolutely certain the data would never be recovered. If Ray Gricar is still alive somewhere, he's managed to stay hidden for 20 years. No credit card activity, no phone calls, no confirmed sightings. For a man with no criminal background, no experience living off the grid, that would be an extraordinary accomplishment. If he's dead, his body has eluded every search. The river has been dragged, the banks have been combed, the surrounding woods have been searched. Nothing. Either way, the mystery endures. A prosecutor who knew all the tricks, who understood how people disappear and how they're found. He used that knowledge, one way or another, and he left behind only questions. The laptop sits in evidence somewhere, a waterlogged shell. The hard drive is destroyed beyond recovery, and Ray Gricar is gone.